Ladies and gentlemen, the house is now open. The house is now open. Thank
you. You're listening to Unseen Theatrics with Clinton Kamak.
Hello and welcome to today's episode. This role has huge responsibility, from recording stage movements and changes into the script in rehearsals to calling cues during the show. Today we are talking about a deputy stage manager, DSM. Jess has been a stage manager for many years and a part of the State Opera team since 2013. She's also been seen stage managing a venue during many of the festivals that run in Adelaide. Please welcome Jess to Unseen Theatrics podcast for today.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey. How you going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. That's a nice chirpy start to the episode.
It's the start of my weekend, so you know.
Tell me how your work colleagues would describe you briefly.
I think you already said it, chipper.
Yeah. It works quite well, doesn't it?
Chipper, bubbly, talkative.
That may come in handy.
Does, yeah. It's a good skill.
That's a good start. Yeah.
Is that about right?
That works from what I know of you. Definitely.
Okay, good.
Definitely.
Good. Excellent.
All right. So, what skills are required to be a DSM, and what is a DSM?
So DSM is deputy stage manager, and their main task is to call the show. So a lot of musicals and opera will have deputies, whereas straight plays tend not to, depending on the show. Key skills is to talk calmly and clearly on comms, know the show and all its technical elements inside and out, and do clear notation and blocking in the prompt copy.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Yep.
In a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's a good overview of it. So you just mentioned prompt copy, otherwise known as the Bible. How do you keep it organized?
Well, I've just started to go digital, so I'm learning how to do that on my iPad at the moment. Yep. But mainly I kind of, you block out your score. Like for me, for opera, I'll divide my prompt copy into where the interval break is, and do each half of the opera that way. And I'll try and tabulate it into songs or scenes or arias, depending on how the opera is laid out, and or the director wants to break it up. And then I basically post-it notes and flags were my best friends in the organised. So now I'm just trying to make the digital version of that.
Yeah, so you're currently trying to work out how to do all the analog stuff digitally.
Sure am. Yeah. It's a good challenge. Getting there. Right. I did it last year, the end of last year. I did it for Requiem, so that worked out really well.
Right. Can I ask what apps you used on the iPad?
I'm using Fourscore, so the musician app. So Emily, who is in my team for opera, she started it, and so we put in our blank pages as PDFs in between every single musical page. And then we make it to page view, and then call from there. I guess it's not really much more work than doing paper.
Okay.
We're still notating the same amount.
And
instead of photocopying and binding, you're inserting blank pages effectively.
Okay, cool. And easy to edit and change your notes?
Yeah, we're getting there. The annoying thing is that Fourscore, every time you go to edit, it zooms in on where you want to edit. But you kind of get used to it and the rhythm of it. And I kind of have a separate notebook that for any major chorus blocking and all that kind of stuff, I'll just make notations and just write the bar number next to it, and then I'll go put it in later.
Okay. Yeah. You're the DSM, you call the show. You've got other people in the stage management team though, don't you?
Yeah. Now I'm resident stage manager, but I still call. So but I have been DSM for 6 years now.
But you work with stage manager, assistant stage managers, and all that kind of stuff?
So generally one ASM on the floor and the SM on the floor, and then I'll be at the desk.
Okay. Yeah, cool. You've just mentioned one of them. What are the essentials in your SM kit that you take? You obviously take your iPad now
Yeah, I take my iPad everywhere. Charger,
and battery supply.
all with the charger.
Yeah.
And battery supply, exactly. And now a USB that has like the multiple backups of
Yes.
deep heat is always in my theatre kit.
Yep.
Rocker. iPad, like Sharpies, pencils, like all that still.
Yeah.
Notebook.
Yep.
That's a simple kit.
Yeah.
The road case has everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's like my Pelly.
Yeah.
We'll start getting into sort of the production of it. Pre-production, when you're in the rehearsal room and that, what do you do in the rehearsal room?
Rehearsal room, I block the whole show. So I'll sit out the front and make notations of what each artist and or group of people being the chorus do.
Yep.
Write down entrances and exits, where they're coming from and when and where they go and when they exit, what props they may or may be tracking and traveling with them.
Yep.
Where said props end up if they get brought on stage and where they end up on stage. Quick changes, if an artist has any quick change, when that occurs and how much time they have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Is that all in the prompt book, or is that all separate bits of paperwork? Both. Yep.
Yeah. So I make sure that all of that information's in my prompt book, and then it gets extracted into plots for each department.
Okay. So you've kept very busy.
Yeah, very busy. Lots of hand cramps.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, too much writing.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like, you get some like slower rehearsals. Chorus calls for us are always busy.
Yep.
Yeah, they're always, 3 hours. A 3-hour rehearsal with the chorus goes super fast.
Yep.
You've got a lot of people to notate and move around in a scene in a short period of time. So, being on top of what they have to do and when, and slotting in principals and stuff like that, they're the busiest calls in a rehearsal room.
Yeah.
You also get to learn everybody's name super damn quite fast because you have to write it down 50,000 times.
Yep. So you're good at remembering names?
Yeah, I am now. It was the one thing I got taught in my first show at opera is learn everybody's names super duper quick. And I think I learned all the chorus names within the first 2 calls because you're just constantly looking at name tags and writing it down and talking it down.
Yeah. Wow. All right. That's kind of so you're constantly building working relationships in this time.
Yeah, all the time. And I think especially like with the chorus and things like that, the more that you know about them, or like even principal artists and all that kind of stuff, like, I've got artists that I know that live like down south and are an hour and a half away, so I can't call them like 20 minutes and be like, oh, your call time's changed, or getting to know everybody and their circumstances. And especially with our chorus as well, like they work day jobs, so that you can't call them like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and say that your rehearsal's been cancelled. You send them a text, or if you know what their lifestyle is like, then you can adapt around that. So the more, and it's really good just to get to know people, but that also comes to really help with the job and communicating with them in the best way that works for them.
Yep. So you do plenty of communicating with the cast and principals and that during rehearsal time?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's always changing, and especially like with rehearsals and stuff, like if you've got to change call times and or costume fittings and wig fittings and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. If you like what you hear, please subscribe so you can hear each episode as it comes out. Is there anything else in the rehearsal room that's important to note?
Depending on how the team runs, I mean, like for us, for opera, we have a whole different language. For pickup points, it's not just a line, it's making sure that where the director wants to go from for production values is also a good place musically to pick up. It might be in a really hard vocal spot.
Yep.
For artists and for our repetitor who are playing and the conductor. So it's about a compromise and making sure that you don't go too far back to waste anybody's time, but you're also giving it a comfortable lead in for all the artists involved as well. So yeah, that's a fine line of making sure that you can get the right communication and all that kind of stuff. So you've got to be pretty on it about.
And balance between what you need and what they need.
Yeah, pretty much. And if you can cut, like, I mean, we'll talk about like with tech, but yeah, that comes into play a lot in tech rehearsal. So if you can develop that relationship with your creatives in the rehearsal room early on,
That makes
then it
tech
will
so
make
much
tech
easier.
rehearsals a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really good to make those foundations as early as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So we'll move into bumping. So you're getting into the theatre. What does your first day of bumping kind of look like? What's going on?
For me, first day of bumping and really lighting session, first lighting plot for me.
Okay. Yep.
The sets all done by production management and crew.
Yep.
And props and all that kind of stuff. So that all gets transferred. And then generally for me, first day on deck is lighting plot and at the desk. So everything's already in place. Props, ASM and stage management will look after that. And then I'll be out the front on the desk with a designer and or director if they're available.
Okay. Yeah, nice. That's you get to miss out on like a week of bumping then.
Yeah, I don't do the grunt work. It's great.
Yeah, how good's that? So you're obviously talking with lighting designer, LX operator. Who else
Yeah.
are you communicating during the lighting plot period?
Plots, I'll communicate mainly to like flies and mechs and head mech if we need to swap any scenery over for the designer.
Yep.
Hopefully they're in a position to work in order, so you can kind of start from the top and work your way forwards. That doesn't always pan out, which is fine because of other different things depending on set elements and things like that, and or where we need to end up at the end of a session to get ready for the next day.
Yep.
So yeah, generally I'll talk to the stage management on the floor and head mech and flyers, along with designers and lighting up. But for operas, for remounts and things like that, I already have the cues and the cues in my score. It's just
Yep.
a matter of confirming like cue points and getting fade times where I can. But just making sure that my purpose for them at the desk is keeping track of where we're at and then prepping what elements need to change on stage and get that ready for when the designer's ready to move on. So
Yep. So you've just talked about working with lighting. Do you do anything with sound?
depending on the show,
Yep.
for a sound plot, it's tricky for us because 9 times out of 10, like we can't create levels properly until we have an orchestra.
Totally.
So we'll kind of like in the first tech run with a piano dress rehearsal, we'll do a couple of elements of sound effects depending on the show and how many there are.
Yep.
With the conductor and the director. And then we'll set like a standard level for a piano dress rehearsal, and then we'll refine the level again when we get the orchestra for stage orchestrals. So yeah, sounds a bit trickier, but
That's okay. That's all right. So you've just mentioned tech run.
Yep.
You're talking with more people. What's your involvement during tech run?
tech runs for us, we have 2 stages of tech in opera. So we have a piano dress rehearsal, which is pretty much as it sounds like, it's just with piano only.
Yep.
And all singers, full costume, full makeup. So I'm liaising and dealing with hair and makeup, making sure principals are called where they need to be called for wig and makeup times.
Yep.
That chorus are all ready to go at the half. And I'm communicating with mechs, flies, LX, sound, props, and making sure they all know. Hopefully the director is working chronologically and working in order. But again, not always the case.
Yeah.
So piano dress is a director's stage time. So he can, like, they can stop and start when they want to. It's also our tech time for safety and crew. So if we need to do any scene changes that don't work, we can also say we need to do that again.
Yep.
And we get to develop that. But we don't always have the chorus at every single piano dress. So the director's got to be strategic in what they need to achieve. They might just get a 3-hour call with principals only and work on principal scenes.
Yep.
And then jump in around chorus scenes when you get the chorus in the evening. So my job is to develop what the director wants to get out of each session and make sure that we achieve that. We've also got to make sure that we adhere to musician breaks and break every hour and a half for 15 minutes. So we don't go into union rules with them.
Sounds like fun.
And go into overtime.
Yes.
Yeah, so we just make sure that we, it's my responsibility to make sure that we achieve that the director wants done and get up to certain points.
Yep.
So that they can get everything that I do, because they can't stop a stage orchestral. That then becomes the conductor's rehearsal.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So you said during the lighting plot you were sitting out the front. Have you moved backstage to your prompt desk during?
Oh yeah. Some people don't. Some stage managers choose to will stay out the front, to be around creatives, but I like to be in the corner. I get my head into the game so much more, with what I need to see and what I can hear and what I can't hear, and what I can see on monitors and what I can't see on monitors.
Less distractions as well.
Yeah, it's less distractions, and also I call better if I'm in my calling position in the corner, rather than calling out the front. I find it super distracting.
Yep.
That's my personal preference, in the void where no one can see me.
Yep.
We move on, which is great, because when we move on to stage orchestrals, I'm pretty much right on top of the pit. So that's an awesome spot to be in the festival theatre, is right in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So I get full sight lines to the orchestra and stage.
Yep.
By stage orchestral, so at this point we've normally had about 3 to 4 tech runs in the theatre in piano dress rehearsals.
Yep.
And then we get about 3 stage orchestrals before the final dress.
Okay.
So all of our quick changes, all of our technical elements, all need to be pretty much in the refining stage now. No major elements, because the orchestra will only do 2.5 hour calls and then 1 3-hour call. So we don't have as much time.
It's not a lot of time to get through the whole show.
No, and when an opera goes for 3 hours, the conductor has to be quite strategic as well with what they want to do. Thankfully, a lot of them like to go from start to finish.
Yep.
But again, with chorus, it's not sometimes always the case.
Yep.
So it's up to me to really push for that. And if we do start and the stage manager's on the floor, then in all of these technical rehearsals, when the stage manager goes out and they stop and they get the new pickup point, I'm in the corner hearing what the stage manager and the creatives are saying, and then resetting tech, so that while the stage manager's out there on the floor communicating with everybody or sorting out whatever reason why they've stopped or going through notes, then I'm resetting all the crew and getting back to where we need to be to recommence.
I hope you're enjoying this week's episode. Tune in next week as we continue to talk to Jess about her role as a DSM.
I think the key in a showstop is to not freak out. The LX86 go. If you don't have the passion for this industry, you don't survive those days at all.
What's kind of the communication process between you, the person that's out on stage, and the creative sitting out the front? How do you communicate and make sure you're going from the right point, which we kind of touched on a little bit in the rehearsal?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's the biggest reason for having a DSM. It's not impossible to do that as a calling stage manager. It just means that you've got to be more on the ball of what's happened, what needs to occur, and what needs to reset. So you kind of can do that on comms a bit more while they're doing notes and things like that. And yeah, kind of like run around. And if I'm doing that, then I'll just make sure that I recommence the call, and I'm still out on stage with my score, and then I run back to the desk as quickly as possible. So wireless comms are a girl's best friend.
Totally.
But yeah, it's trickier, but that to me is like the best way. Like with a DSM, you're listening. You don't have to communicate to the stage manager if you're listening to what they're saying enough, and if you can hear what the creatives are saying, then you can preempt that and go back to where you need to go, or move forward to where you need to move forward to, and then get the crew to
set ready to go when they're ready.
Yeah, so that you're not wasting time. Because if the creatives have to wait for you, then it's not really ideal, unless there is a dire emergent reason why. Like if a reset happens, that needs to be slow. And if there are technical rehearsals, like for example for Requiem, when we had the big hydraulic winched floor, not hydraulic, it wasn't hydraulic. When we had the floor that lifted up with the motors, there are elements of no return. So we would make sure that the creatives knew when we would need to stop in technical rehearsals before any of those cues started to occur and started to activate.
Yeah.
Because resetting is just
painful.
It would take too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was one, the first show I called in the festival theatre. It wasn't the first show I ever called. The first show I called in the festival theatre, I had to call 2 1-ton pillars that crashed either side of the main artist.
Yep.
In Don Giovanni, and he had to hit a certain point on the stage, and I wasn't allowed to call it unless he was safely in that position.
Yep.
And then I would call the pillars and they'd crash. And I remember in tech, and especially in the stage orchestral runs, we had to give the conductor the point of no return, because there was all these safety measures that happened to, like, all things had to be unclipped and released before they could do their final release of the columns. And so we get up to that point and you just like see the adrenaline. It's like, are you going to stop? Are you going to keep on going? Are you going to stop? We're not stopping. Okay, we're keeping on going. And like once they happened, you couldn't just like reset them. Like once they were down, they were down.
Yeah.
It took ages for them to get reset back into position, but it was so terrifying, but exhilarating, but terrifying at the same time. Of like getting that point of no return.
Yes. So you've got more than one camera, I'd hope, looking at the stage in your deep dark hole side stage.
Yeah, so I tend to have 3 cams, one on the conductor and one infrared and one color.
Okay. Yep.
That's how I tend to roll.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And that's actually pretty standard to have that kind of setup for musicals and operas. And if musicals have traps, like you just said, there's generally one on the trap.
Yeah.
So you can see that they're not standing on it, so there's no accidents happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of musicals, like they'll have like automation cams and all that kind of stuff, and just to make sure that everything's all
good
in place. I don't know how they look at so many different things sometimes, but yeah, you do.
Yeah, that's it. You get used to it.
You adapt.
Yeah.
So
we've managed to get through tech run, dress run. This is very much refinement. Is very getting very fine.
Yeah.
What's your involvement in dress run?
Dress run for us. So we have one final dress and that's it.
Yep.
Technically our dress runs are kind of like stage orchestrals, but we like in terms of an official dress run, we only ever have one. And we treat it like a show.
Yep.
So we'll do full show calls, tunes start from the very top of the piece, and we will work our way through, and we overstop in case of dire emergent safety reasons.
Okay.
Otherwise we just treat it like a performance and go for gold, basically. So I'll just call it as normal, and we call the show as normal. If we've got invited guests, I just make sure that they're all in before we start, but generally we'll start on time regardless.
Yep.
And just kind of treat it like a show.
Oh, that's the main thing, right?
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah, totally.
I've done some shows where it hasn't quite worked out that way, and opening night's been the first time I've called it properly. But
look, you always need a little bit of adrenaline, don't you?
A little bit.
During this time, you guys get tech time within the rehearsal schedules and that.
Yeah.
What do you do in that tech time? Do you sort of look what the other departments are doing, or do you have your own things?
Depending on what's needing to occur in the tech time. Like if we need to be involved on stage to run any scene changes or things like that, then we'll run those changes.
Yep.
If it's just tidy ups or maintenance and things like that, then 9 times out of 10, like there'll be paperwork and plots that need to be updated or score work that needs to be updated and tidied up. So we'll be floating, but not necessarily active on stage. We'll just be a presence around the place while they do their thing. And then if they need assistance or questions and things like that, then we're on deck to deal with it as it comes. But yeah, depending on what needs to be achieved.
Cool.
Depends on how involved we are.
Updating paperwork is the main thing.
Prime goal.
Yes, gotta love that paperwork.
Oh yeah.
Nothing else in dress run that you'd normally pick up on or do?
No, because a lot of that gets done, like for us in tech.
Yep.
Because thankfully for remounts and things like that, the creatives know that something works, so it's just a matter of us getting it to work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, cool.
You can't really say something that, it doesn't work because we don't feel like it, because they know that something works and you've just got to do it.
You've got to make it work. Yeah.
Yep.
We'll move on to a show day.
Yep.
Talk us through a show day from, sort of what time you arrive at the venue and your pre-show checks and that.
So I tend to get to the venue around 4 o'clock for a 7:30 show.
Okay.
I like to slowly ease my way in. I don't like to be rushed before a show.
It's probably the worst thing to do.
Yeah. It sucks being rushed. Yeah. So I can ease my way in. I'll do any emails or any schoolwork if there's like an element of the opera that's like tricky in the call, then I'll make sure that I sit down with an archival and practice those bits if I need to, just to make sure that it's refreshed in my brain, especially if we've had a day off.
Yep.
Then I'll go through those elements and get my head back in the game if we've had a day off. And then I walk around and I go say hi to all the crew and see how they're traveling. If anything needs to be fixed from the show before.
Yep.
Or the rehearsal before, just make sure that that's all been achieved before we start pre-shows and pre-show checks and things like that. And then, yeah, just making sure I check in with each department is my main pre-show check to getting into preset. And then I'll tend to go and have dinner.
Yep.
And then I'll come back and do final presets and pre-show checks with the stage management team and touch base and make sure that we're ready to open the house at the 15-minute call.
Okay. Yeah. In that you mentioned recordings of the show. Do you use them regularly to help with, like, to improve scene changes or help your calling? I know you mentioned help your calling, but do you use it for other purposes as well?
Yeah, so way back in the rehearsal period, like I'll make sure that I have a copy, if there is a copy available to us, of an archival performance from the other companies. It's useful as a reference for directors and creatives to see, make sure that they're on the same path, or to see if something worked, or if something that we're doing is not working, then they've got a reference back to that. And also I find it's really good because a lot of conductors will try and be around a similar tempi, so it's not just a random Spotify recording of an opera. You can kind of get the right tempi and rhythm, and it's extra useful if it's the same conductor, because then you know that you've got the exact tempi that they're going to do. So
continuity.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And then I'll use it to practice the call.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, practice makes perfect.
Yeah, sure does.
Yeah, totally. You've gone and had your lovely food, and you get back to the venue because that's where the show is.
Yep.
Do you go straight to the desk, or do you hang out for a little bit first?
I'll tend to do the hour call and the half-hour call from stage door.
Yep.
Because then I can check sign-in sheets and make sure that everyone's in the building. And I just kind of, if I can, I'll try and go around to every dressing room and say hi to everyone. That doesn't necessarily always pan out, but I'll try and make sure that I see everyone. And then I check in with like wardrobe and wigs.
Yep.
And make sure they're all happy.
Mm-hmm.
And then from about just after the half hour, I make my way to stage and to the corner. Do final checks, and then at the 15 I'll check in with the head mech and we will open the house and then call front of house, and then once I've opened the house I'm at the desk.
So from about 15 minutes to curtain up.
Yeah, so I don't move.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you like what you're listening to, check out my Facebook page, Unseen Theatrics, for more show notes and links sharing education of live theatre. Tell me about sign-in sheets and what they're used for.
Useful for emergencies. Useful to know that everyone's in the building. In emergency, we use them just to basically like head check and make sure that we've got everyone if we need to evacuate.
Yep.
And then just we get everyone to sign in when they're in the theatre, so that we know that they're in the building. So if we can't get to go and do a face-to-face with everyone, it's much easier to check off names for a company of about 70 than it is to go and touch base with every single person individually. So,
all right, very helpful.
Very.
At your desk.
Yeah.
What is at your SM desk?
iPad
Yep.
with the score now.
Yep.
My phone, which has got the show timer on it.
Okay. Yeah, that's an app.
That's an app.
Yep.
It's quite handy. It's quite cool. It sends you notifications like 2 minutes before each call.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What one's that called?
It is called Show SW.
Yeah, cool.
So you can put in the show times and then it calculates, and you can put in the half hours, and it gives you notices. It also calculates if you have to do a show stop, then you just tap show stop, and it marks down the time when the show stop occurred.
Yep.
And then you hit resume, and it marks down when you restarted. So it takes that time for you. It's really, really good.
I think my my hardest bit in that would be to remember to hit the stop and the start if a show stop happened.
Look, I haven't had to touch wood do that yet.
Right. But I'm assuming you could do that for intervals as well.
You do it for intervals. I do it for the orchestra tune. Yeah, you can create different labels and sections of the stopwatch as you need it, so you can personalize it.
Yep.
As much as possible.
Yep. So at your desk, we've worked out we've got notebook, iPad, all the chargers, your phone,
All the charges.
the
Water.
3 monitors that we mentioned earlier, so you could actually see the stage.
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
hear the stage?
I can. I have a show monitor as well, which is great. With a show relay.
Yeah, cool. All right. Other things, do you have a cast call mic at or a God mic as well at the SM desk?
I have both.
Cool. And for people, what is cast call?
Cast call is when I can talk on my mic and it gets addressed down to the dressing rooms and backstage, like the corridors and things like that, of who I need on stage level. And I tend to do a cast call 5 minutes before they're needed, before their entrance on stage.
Cool. And I'm sure that comes in very handy when doing tech rehearsal or doing rehearsals with chorus members and principals, getting them up on stage when you're jumping all around the place.
Yep, again, so that comes to like, if you can get a plan from the director, then you know who to call when, especially if you're jumping around. They can't necessarily like rely on the relay, but yeah, we call them to stage as a lovely courtesy.
All right. So, and nothing else? Yeah. You do you have lollies to keep yourself going? Lots of sugar?
No, I don't actually.
Okay.
I talk too much to like eat sugar.
Right.
Drink bottle, deep heat again.
Yeah.
Which I've almost eaten while calling a show because I forgot I
Okay.
put it on my neck and I.
No, that's all right. And then you nearly use it as lip balm.
I almost put it in my eye as well. It's a hazard at the desk, but it's
that would be painful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who needs to be able to read a script when you've got deep heat in your eyes?
I have a mat because of my granny knees. I have a mat.
Okay.
On the floor so I can stand comfortably because I don't sit while calling. I get too complacent if I sit, so I stand. And my attention to detail is much better if I stand. I will make sure I have comfy shoes. I move, I sway, I dance.
Look, all the normal things you would do when you're standing.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. That concludes part 1 of this chat with Jess. Tune in next week for part 2 about the process of calling a show.